Get ready to uncover the dark side of politics as we count down the 10 most notorious and unforgettable political jerks in world history. From scandals to power plays, these politicians left their mark for all the wrong reasons. Number 10. Joseph McCarthy. Joseph McCarthy, born on November 14, 1908 in Appleton, Wisconsin, was a name synonymous with one of the darkest periods in American history. He might not have been a dictator in the traditional sense, but his actions left an indelible mark on the nation. McCarthy is best known for the anti-communist McCarthyism era that gripped the U.S. in the 1950s. During this tumultuous time, he accused numerous Americans of being communist sympathizers without any substantial evidence. McCarthy's tactics were ruthless, and he made no-holds-barred attacks on anyone he viewed as subversive, using powerful and emotional speeches to convey his message. His real fame came when, during a speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, McCarthy waved a paper that he claimed contained the names of 57 communists working within the U.S. government. He went even further, stating that he had approximately 205 names of individuals who were either communists or communist sympathizers, also known as fellow travelers. Many of the names were derived from a list known as the Lee List. However, it's crucial to note that despite his sensational accusations and speeches, none of the names on those lists were ever proven to have been communists or even to have engaged in communist activities. McCarthy's claims were often wild and unsupported, and this practice became widely known as McCarthyism. Moreover, McCarthy asserted that his infamous hearings aimed to not only identify alleged communists in the government, but to uncover those who had supposedly hired them in the first place. Initially, he was unwilling to reveal the names on his list of 205 supposed communists, but eventually he was compelled to do so. Surprisingly, it was revealed that there weren't even 205 names on the list, and the majority of the names that were on the list had no connection to communism. Number 9. Idi Amin. Born in a rural village in Uganda in 1923, Amin belonged to the Kakwa tribe. His early life was marked by limited education, leaving him functionally illiterate. At the age of 18, during the Second World War, Amin enlisted in the British Army, specifically in the East African Rifles, where he fought against the Japanese in Burma. After the war, he joined the British 4th Ugandan Battalion and showcased his military prowess by distinguishing himself during the fight against Kenya's Mau Maus from 1953 to 1957. Despite his lack of formal education, Amin's military acumen led to his promotion to sergeant major and his admission to an officer training program. In 1964, 2 years after Uganda gained independence from Great Britain, Amin was appointed deputy chief of the nation's Army and Air Force with the rank of colonel. Dr. Milton Obote, who seized power in Uganda in 1966, appointed Amin as his right-hand man, further promoting him to a major general in 1968. However, by 1970, a power struggle had developed between the two, with both craving more influence. On January 25, 1971, Amin executed a military coup, overthrowing Obote and forcing him into exile. Amin declared himself president and general, and a year later promoted himself to field marshal. Initially, his victory was met with widespread support, but quickly turned to fear and hatred as Amin began a reign of terror that would last from 1971 to 1979. Amin's regime was characterized by mass killings. Within months of assuming office, he ordered the murder of over 5,000 members of rival tribes and began a reign of terror that resulted in the death of at least 350,000 Ugandans. In 1972, anchored by the control of Ugandan commerce by foreign residents, Amin expelled 55,000 Asian workers and businessmen, seizing their assets and businesses. He also misappropriated $1.5 billion in foreign aid money, using it to triple the size of Uganda's army. In 1975, Amin declared himself president for life and embarked on a campaign to humiliate British nationals. He even forced Englishmen to carry him around in a sedan chair during an Organization of African Unity rally. Amin received international attention in 1976 when he allowed terrorists to use Entebbe Airport as a base to hold hostages from a hijacked Air France airliner. In a daring midnight raid on July 4, 1976, Israeli commandos freed the hostages. Although Amin claimed he was trying to negotiate the hostages' release, there was evidence of his cooperation with the hijackers. Despite converting to Islam, Amin was oppressive in his new religion and was a noted polygamist. By 1977, Uganda's economy was in shambles, and Amin began losing support. In an attempt to rally the Ugandan people, he ordered an invasion of neighboring Tanzania. However, this marked the beginning of the end for Amin's oppressive rule. Tanzanian soldiers captured Kampala on April 11, 1979, ending Amin's regime and forcing him into exile. He lived in Libya and later Saudi Arabia until his death in 2003, taking with him much of his ill-gotten wealth and supporters. Idi Amin's legacy remains a chilling reminder of the horrors of unchecked power and human rights abuses. Number 8. Nikolai Ceausescu. Nikolai Ceausescu, the Romanian communist dictator who ruled from 1965 to 1989. His regime was marked by severe censorship, brutal repression, and economic mismanagement. Born in 1918, Ceausescu rose through the ranks of the Romanian Communist Party to become its general secretary in 1965. He then became Romania's head of state, serving as president of the State Council from 1967, and later as president of the Republic from 1974. His rule continued until his downfall during the Romanian Revolution in December 1989, which was part of a wave of anti-communist uprisings across Eastern Europe. Ceausescu's journey to power began during World War II. In 1944, as the Axis powers faced defeat and the Soviet Union invaded Romania, he escaped from prison. With the country falling under communist rule, Ceausescu's ascent began. By 1945, he had become a brigadier general in the Romanian army. Over the next 2 decades, Ceausescu, along with his friend, Gheorghe Dej, who had taken power as the top leader in the country, assumed increasingly influential roles in the government and the Communist Party. In 1955, he became a full-time member of the Politburo and began managing the party's organization structure and cadres. Just before Gheorghe Dej's death in 1965, he designated Ceausescu as his successor. However, despite his rise, Ceausescu's regime was plagued by economic mismanagement, leading to a declining standard of living in Romania. This in turn weakened his grip on power. In November 1987, thousands of workers stormed the Communist Party headquarters in Brașov, a significant act of defiance against Ceausescu's rule. Records were destroyed, and a grand portrait of Ceausescu was torn down. Ultimately, in December 1989, a popular revolt supported by the army removed the Ceausescus from power and put them on trial. Romania's new leaders wanted to demonstrate to the population that they no longer needed to fear the Ceausescus. On December 25th, a swift and symbolic trial lasting less than 1 hour resulted in the couple being charged with genocide and other crimes. Shortly after their conviction, Nikolai Ceausescu and his wife were executed by a firing squad. Their remains were laid to rest at a cemetery in Bucharest. Ceausescu's rule, marked by censorship, repression, and economic hardship, was brought to a decisive end in the Romanian Revolution of 1989. Number 7. Pol Pot. Pol Pot, the notorious leader of the Khmer Rouge, was responsible for the Cambodian genocide in the 1970s, resulting in the deaths of millions. Born as Saloth Sar on May 19, 1925 in Kampong Tom Province, Cambodia, Pol Pot grew up in a relatively prosperous family that owned 50 acres of rice paddies. His early education took place at a monastery in the capital city of Phnom Penh, and later he attended a French Catholic school. Eventually, he pursued studies in carpentry and received a government scholarship that sent him to Paris in 1949 to study radio technology. However, his time in Paris led to a radical transformation. While in Paris, he became involved with the Communist Party and adopted the name Pol Pot. After his scholarship was withdrawn, he returned to Cambodia with the goal of fomenting revolution. In 1956, he married Q Ponari, whom he had met in Paris, and became a high school educator. In 1962, Pol Pot rose to become the general secretary of his party, but fearing arrest, he fled Phnom Penh in 1963. The political landscape in Cambodia changed significantly in 1970 when Prince Norodom Sihanouk was overthrown and replaced by Lon Nol with the support of the U.S. After a civil war, which included heavy U.S. bombing aimed at preventing communist leaders from taking over Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge Army seized control of Phnom Penh in the spring of 1975. Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge implemented a radical transformation, setting the calendar to Year Zero as they sought to create what they considered a new Cambodia. Under Pol Pot's regime, Cambodia witnessed some of the darkest days of the 20th century. Mass executions, forced labor, and extreme brutality marked this period. It wasn't until late 1978 that Vietnam entered Cambodia, leading to the deposition of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge in early 1979. As Cambodia opened up to the world, the full extent of the horrors became apparent, with mass graves, often referred to as killing fields, serving as grim evidence of the atrocities. A tribunal found Pol Pot guilty of genocide, though he was never imprisoned. The world became more aware of the horror through the 1984 Oscar-nominated film The Killing Fields, which depicted the experiences of the Cambodian people during this dark period of history. The reign of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge stands as a stark reminder of the potential for extreme brutality in totalitarian regimes. Number 6. Slobodan Milosevic. A key figure during the Yugoslav Wars, he was accused of war crimes and ethnic cleansing. Slobodan Milosevic, born on August 20, 1941, was a prominent Yugoslav and Serbian politician. He served as president of Serbia within Yugoslavia from 1989 to 1997. During his tenure, Serbia transitioned from being a part of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia to an independent entity. Milosevic further became the president of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia from 1997 to 2000, solidifying his grip on power. Notably, Milosevic had been a high-ranking member of the League of Communists of Serbia during the 1980s, and his political journey took a significant turn in 1990 when he founded the Socialist Party of Serbia, which he led until 2003. This transition marked a shift towards nationalist and authoritarian politics in the region. What sets Milosevic apart in the annals of history is his involvement in the Yugoslav Wars, a devastating conflict that engulfed the Balkans in the 1990s. Accusations of war crimes and ethnic cleansing are etched in this period, and Milosevic's role was central. As a political leader, he played a substantial part in the unfolding tragedy. Though not without competition in this regard, Milosevic has fascinated biographers due to his dramatic rise to power and subsequent fall, culminating in his trial before an international criminal tribunal. Many aspects of his life, from ambition and political skill to ruthlessness and his personality, have intrigued those who have sought to understand him. The complex relationships in his life, including his marriage to the influential Mirjana Markovic, have been subjects of intense interest. Moreover, the West's ethical and moral quandary regarding its dealings with Milosevic and the guilt associated with this history have spurred writers and researchers to explore his life and legacy. Libor, a journalist who reported from the former Yugoslavia during the early stages of the conflict, conducted numerous interviews with individuals who were part of Milosevic's life journey. These interviews encompassed schoolmates, business associates, and colleagues who served alongside him, as well as those who suffered due to his actions. Libor even spoke with Mirjana Markovic following her husband's arrest. This rich tapestry of insights, combined with Libor's concise and unembellished writing style, provides a vivid account of Milosevic's life, a man whose legacy is deeply intertwined with a chapter of history that serves as a stark reminder of the horrors of war and ethnic conflict. Number 5. Robert Mugabe. Robert Mugabe was a Zimbabwean revolutionary and politician. He served as prime minister from 1980 to 1987, and subsequently as president of Zimbabwe from 1987 to 2017. His journey in politics began when he became the leader of the Zimbabwe African National Union from 1975 to 1980. Later, he led the ZANU Patriotic Front, ZANU-PF, from 1980 to 2017, effectively dominating the political landscape. While his early years in politics were marked by African nationalism, in the 1970s and 80s, Mugabe identified as a Marxist-Leninist. However, his ideological stance shifted towards socialism after the 1990s. In his youth, Mugabe returned to his hometown in southern Rhodesia in 1960, intending to introduce his fiancée to his family. To his surprise, he encountered a drastically transformed environment. The colonial government's policies had resulted in the displacement of thousands of black families, and the white population had grown significantly. The government's refusal to grant black majority rule led to violent protests, and Mugabe himself was deeply angered by the discrimination. In July 1960, Mugabe delivered a significant address to a crowd of 7,000 protesters at Harare Town Hall. This gathering aimed to protest the arrest of opposition leaders and served as a turning point. Mugabe, in the face of political threats, spoke about Ghana's successful path to independence through Marxism, inspiring many. Shortly thereafter, Mugabe was elected public secretary of the National Democratic Party. Drawing inspiration from Ghana's model, he established a militant youth league dedicated to achieving black independence in Rhodesia. The government banned the party by the end of 1961, but its supporters regrouped to form the Zimbabwe African People's Union, which quickly attracted a staggering 450,000 members. Mugabe's frustration grew as change remained elusive, and he openly discussed the idea of starting a guerrilla war. He even declared defiantly, quote, "We are taking over this country and we will not put up with this nonsense." Mugabe's political career later took a turbulent turn, characterized by a lengthy rule marked by authoritarianism, economic collapse, and controversial land seizures. He ruled Zimbabwe with an iron fist for decades, and his policies sparked a series of economic challenges and international criticism. His tenure is a complicated chapter in Zimbabwe's history. The legacy of Mugabe lives on as Zimbabwe continues to grapple with the enduring impact of his rule, which remains a topic of discussion and debate both within the nation and internationally. In a more contemporary context, the case of Martha O'Donovan, an American woman living in Zimbabwe, charged with subverting the government and undermining the authority of the president, highlights the ongoing concerns surrounding freedom of speech and expression in Zimbabwe. Her case and the government's actions suggest that social media and activism continue to be closely monitored in the lead-up to national elections. Number 4. Muammar Gaddafi. He ruled Libya for over 4 decades, becoming known for his oppressive regime and support for terrorism. But there's more to this enigmatic figure. Gaddafi's flamboyant dress sense was one of his notable characteristics, as he was often seen in gaudy, bespoke military uniforms or flowing robes in various vibrant colors. Born in 1942 in the Libyan desert, his exact birth date remains a subject of debate. Coming from a humble background as the son of a poor Bedouin nomad, Gaddafi spent his early years in a remote desert camp. It wasn't until he turned 9 that he ventured off to school. It was at school where he encountered the transformative speeches of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, which ignited his passion for Arab nationalism. Gaddafi's journey in politics started when he organized fellow students into revolutionary study groups while studying at the University of Libya in Tripoli, from where he graduated with a history degree in 1963. Subsequently, he joined the Libyan Military Academy in Benghazi, where he encountered cadets who shared his anti-Western nationalism. This was a turning point in his life. In 1965, Gaddafi was commissioned into the Libyan army and began laying the groundwork for an overthrow of King Idris, whom he saw as a Western pawn. His efforts bore fruit on September 1, 1969, when he successfully staged a coup, taking control of the army. Gaddafi assumed the role of chairman of the ruling Revolutionary Council and declared himself commander-in-chief of Libya's armed forces, all with the rank of colonel. Gaddafi's vision for Libya was ambitious. He started by nationalizing all foreign banks and oil companies while demanding the closure of European military bases in Libya. In 1970, he took a controversial step by seizing the private assets of Libya's Italian and Jewish residents, effectively driving them from the country. Throughout his rule, Gaddafi provided support to a wide array of terrorist groups and regimes, including Iran, Iraq, Syria, Uganda, the PLO and its subgroups, and the Irish Republican Army. He was heavily backed by the Soviet Union and engaged in unsuccessful and disastrous military conflicts, including wars against Egypt and Chad. Gaddafi's provocative actions extended to confrontations with the U.S., one of which led to an American retaliatory bombing raid on his headquarters in Tripoli in 1986. He survived with minor injuries, but the incident claimed the life of his infant daughter. In 1988, Libyan intelligence agents were responsible for the explosion of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, causing the loss of over 200 lives. In the wake of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, Gaddafi made efforts to improve relations with the West by assisting in tracking down Islamic militants. This led to concessions from Western nations, including the easing of various restrictions imposed due to his involvement in terrorism during the 1980s. Gaddafi's rule took a dramatic turn in 2011 during the Arab Spring, when civil unrest erupted, aiming to remove him from power. He responded with a violent and repressive campaign against his own people, sparking a civil war. The conflict pitted Gaddafi's forces against a diverse group of rebels, including students, ordinary citizens, and army defectors. With air and logistical support from NATO, the rebels ultimately prevailed after an 8-month civil war. Gaddafi was captured by rebels in his hometown of Sirte and shortly thereafter met his end. Number 3. Fidel Castro. He was both celebrated and criticized, accused of stifling political dissent and violating human rights. But who was that man behind the iconic beard? Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz was born in Biran, Holguin Province, Cuba. He was the fifth of 9 children. The parents were a plantation owner from Spain and a former servant. Fidel's upbringing in Biran, a rural area, shaped his early life. He was known for his rebellious nature, loud personality, and reputation as a troublesome child. At a young age, Fidel was sent to a Jesuit boarding school in Santiago de Cuba. There, he often faced teasing from wealthier classmates who referred to him as peasant. His academic journey continued at Belen College, and he eventually enrolled at the University of Havana, where he earned a law degree. After graduation, Castro briefly practiced law. Castro's personal life included a marriage to Mirta Diaz-Balart, a wealthy philosophy student with ties to Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. Their union brought a son, Fidelito, into the world, but the couple divorced after 5 years of marriage. Following this period, Castro faced imprisonment and exile. He spent time in Mexico and New York City before embarking on the revolutionary journey that would change Cuba. In 1953, Castro led an attack on the Moncada barracks, a significant move against Batista's rule. The attempt resulted in Castro's imprisonment, but he was later released. Subsequently, he organized a rebel force, which landed in Cuba in 1958. After numerous battles, Castro triumphantly entered Havana on January 8, 1959. With his rise to power, Castro initiated a series of radical changes in Cuba. He abolished legal discrimination, extended access to electricity in rural areas, guaranteed full employment, and advanced the causes of education and healthcare by constructing new schools and medical facilities. However, his regime also imposed censorship on opposition newspapers, imprisoned thousands of political opponents, and delayed elections indefinitely. Additionally, he implemented land reforms, eliminating private businesses, and faced shortages of housing and consumer goods. Over the years, political dissent became increasingly stifled in Cuba, and the nation witnessed an exodus of professionals and technicians who left for the U.S. From the 60s to the 80s, Castro provided military and financial support to various leftist guerrilla movements in Latin America and Africa. Despite tensions with the U.S., relations with many other countries began to normalize. Castro's economy encountered severe difficulties when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s and the U.S. expanded sanctions. Yet Castro found new trading partners and held on to power until 2006, when he temporarily transferred government control to his brother Raul after undergoing emergency intestinal surgery. He permanently resigned in 2008. The year 2015 marked a turning point, with U.S. and Cuban officials agreeing to normalize relations, leading to the opening of embassies and diplomatic missions in each other's countries. Castro's death on November 25, 2016, at the age of 90, was announced on state television and confirmed by his brother Raul. Number 2. Benito Mussolini. Mussolini's journey from ardent socialist to dictator of Italy was marked by authoritarian rule, censorship, and alliances with Nazi Germany. Benito Amilcare Andrea Mussolini, often referred to as Il Duce, the leader, was the force behind the National Fascist Party, which he established in 1919. His political journey led him to become Italy's prime minister, consolidating his power from 1922 until 1943. Despite his early socialist leanings, Mussolini eventually embraced a far-right ideology. Mussolini was born on July 29, 1883, in Italy. His father, Alessandro, was a blacksmith and a devoted socialist, while his mother, Rosa, provided stability to the family as a Catholic teacher. In his youth, Mussolini showed intelligence but was known for his boisterous and disobedient nature. His father's passion for socialist politics and defiance against authority had a profound influence on him. After obtaining a teaching certificate in 1901, Mussolini briefly worked as a schoolmaster. However, his restless spirit led him to leave Italy in 1902 and move to Switzerland to promote socialism. There, he garnered a reputation for his charisma and remarkable oratory skills. But Swiss authorities eventually expelled him. Returning to Italy in 1904, Mussolini continued advocating socialist principles and became the editor of the party's newspaper, Avanti, meaning forward. This elevated his influence and allowed him to reach a broader audience. While Mussolini initially opposed Italy's involvement in World War I, he later saw the war as an opportunity for Italy to regain its greatness. This shift in perspective resulted in his expulsion from the Socialist Party. In 1915, Mussolini enlisted in the Italian army, rose to the rank of corporal, and was eventually wounded and discharged. On March 23, 1919, Mussolini founded the Fascist Party, which united various right-wing groups under a single banner. The movement aimed to eliminate social class discrimination and promote nationalistic sentiments, with Mussolini aspiring to restore Italy to its past Roman glory. Mussolini criticized the Italian government for perceived weakness during the Treaty of Versailles negotiations and harnessed public discontent. He organized a paramilitary unit known as the Black Shirts, who used violence to intimidate political opponents, strengthening the influence of the Fascist Party. As Italy descended into political turmoil, Mussolini claimed that he alone could restore order. In 1922, he was appointed as prime minister, and through gradual dismantling of democratic institutions, he transformed into a dictator. He assumed the title Il Duce, marking the beginning of his autocratic rule. Mussolini's time in power brought significant public works projects and reduced unemployment, making him popular among the masses. However, his government also imposed censorship, suppressed political opposition, and formed alliances with Nazi Germany, leading Italy into World War II. Mussolini's regime came to a tumultuous end when he and his mistress were executed on April 28, 1945, in Italy. Their bodies were hung on display in a Milan plaza. Following the liberation of Rome by Allied forces, Mussolini had attempted to escape to Switzerland, but was apprehended by the Italian underground on April 27, 1945. Mussolini's death was met by many Italians without remorse. Although he had promised Roman glory to his people, his megalomania had led to war and suffering, leaving a complicated legacy. Number 1. Augusto Pinochet. Augusto Pinochet Ugarte, the Chilean military general who ruled with an iron fist, was a significant figure in Chilean history, marked by a tumultuous period of human rights abuses and political upheaval. Pinochet's military career began in 1935 when he joined the Chilean army. He steadily advanced through the ranks and was appointed commander-in-chief by President Salvador Allende in 1973. However, just a month after this appointment, Pinochet led a military coup that overthrew Allende's government, ultimately becoming the leader of the ensuing military regime. Pinochet's regime was marked by widespread human rights abuses, including torture and forced disappearances, as his government sought to suppress political opposition. His rule was characterized by authoritarianism and a lack of civil liberties. After ruling for 17 years, Pinochet's grip on power finally started to loosen. In 1988, a plebiscite rejected his candidacy for an extended presidential term beyond 1990, though he retained his role as commander-in-chief of the army until 1998. The year 1998 marked a significant turn in Pinochet's life. He was arrested in London following a request for his extradition to Spain to stand trial for alleged crimes of genocide and terrorism, which included Spanish nationals as victims. This arrest created international tension and led to civil unrest in Chile between Pinochet supporters and opponents. Despite being under house arrest in the UK and facing extradition proceedings, the UK government later returned Pinochet to Chile on health grounds. Chile's Court of Appeal decided to strip him of immunity from prosecution. In 2001, a Santiago appeals court suspended proceedings against him due to mental unfitness for trial. However, in 2004, the Court of Appeal again removed his immunity from prosecution, paving the way for a potential trial on charges related to human rights abuses during his rule. Pinochet's death on December 10, 2006 occurred without him ever standing trial for the crimes he was accused of committing during his time in power. That's all for today, folks. If you found this video as fascinating as we did, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your fellow fans of history. Also, if you want more gripping history content, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell.